guys, welcome back to Strong Successful Male. So for today, going to read an article titled The Dating Gap, Why the Odds Are Stacked Against Female Graduates Finding a Like-Minded Man. And a big shout out to Dave for sending me this article. And guys, this whole article is about how pretty much good luck to women out there who are ultra picky with these super high standards when it comes to education, trying to find a guy that matches their expectations and education level. Because as time goes on, guys, more and more women, it has been shown statistically that more and more women are graduating college than men and seeking even higher degrees beyond bachelors. And the interesting thing is that obviously many of them, or a great majority, education level, that guy's little certificate saying that he is at this level of status in terms of education, they all want those guys. But less and less guys are going to college, let alone the master's degree, because lots more women go for master's degrees, advanced degrees than guys do. So you got all those women out there pretty much saying the age-old thing, there are no good men out there. Where are all the good men, blah, blah, because there aren't as many guys simply that want to have these degrees. And why am I doing this? I'm doing this, guys, because at the end of the day, what usually happens is, and it's already happening now, these women wait and wait and wait to find that top percentage guy, which mathematically is impossible for all women to get, and they then eventually complain that there are no good men out there. Okay, there's absolutely no good men. We're all the good men. We've all heard it. And shift the blame to us when the reason they're alone and they're not where they want to be in terms of like their life goals with family and all that is because they were too picky. Their expectations were too high. They thought too highly of themselves that they're worth more than they really are. And there you go. And, it's pretty funny. I mean, I get a laugh out of this because, you can see this a mile away. And I know women that are in their 40s and they are single and they've been on and off again for years because they are so darn picky, and they get upset and cry when they're with their girlfriends and they drink and that they're not where they want to be. They're not married. They don't have kids. What do you expect? And then again, the blame is shifted on us, which is a bunch of nonsense. So, but anyhow, guys, I'm going to go more to this article. You'll see a little more what I'm talking about here because, again, it shows the odds are stacked against them, And by the way, I want to point this out that, women, their prime is their late teens and in their 20s. Okay, that's when they look the best physically, and that's when they can have the best options to get what they want. A guy's prime begins in his 30s and goes on to 40s, in some case 50s, depending how he takes care of himself, because that's when a guy's starting to find his place in the world. He's starting to do well for himself. He's starting to becoming who he really is, more confident, better socially. I mean, some guys have it made when they're younger, but the majority of guys in their 30s and 40s. That's where they are in their prime. But a lot of guys end up settling after years and not really getting a whole lot of female attention. They end up settling pretty like the late 20s or 30s because finally girls are paying attention to them, right? That's when usually the girls are settling. They figure out, hey, these girls like me. I'm gonna hook her. I'm gonna get her now and lasso her in before she changes her mind. When they're giving up on their whole prime in their 30s and 40s, when they are the top prize. But anyhow, I'm going to get more into this as I go through the article. And by the way, guys, if you can hear that noise, it's pouring rain out here. Right now, I have a jam-packed schedule today. I got 6 personal training clients from 7 a.m. all the way to the early evening. This is the only time I can do a video, so if you hear the pouring rain, it is what it is. I mean, I got to do this video so I can make sure I can publish this video, my one video a day tonight. So bear with me there. Anyhow, starts off. More women than men are graduating in many countries, but according to Dateonomics, a new book on hookup culture, there's a downside. There may not be enough educated men to go around. Is it time to widen the search? In other words, is it time for these young women to stop being so picky? No. There were, says Kat, perhaps 1 or 2 male students on her English degree. Right there, English degree. All these degrees that you don't exactly see people out there, employers saying we need people with English degrees. No, but again, they want a guy. You could have a guy that makes damn good money, but doesn't have a college degree. Maybe he went part of the way and eventually dropped out, started his own business, or who the hell knows what. But he's making more money than guys that have English degrees or degrees that are not going to go very far. But a lot of women will pick the guy that has the degree versus the guy that doesn't have a degree and makes more money. It absolutely makes no sense. But I'm sure some of you guys know women like that do that. Anyhow, it was the same, she noticed, on her friends' courses. There were a lot of girls at my university, she says. You would look around tutorials or lectures, and there would be 1 or 2 token guys. While there are some degrees, Particularly in science and engineering subjects that are overwhelmingly filled with male students, the general trend in many countries is that far more women go to university than men. And that has definitely been proven. How great to have so many clever, educated young women spilling out every year. But there could be negative consequences, as a new book, Dateonomics, points out. There may not be enough educated men to go around. In other words, all these women, they want a guy that they see on their level. And as I mentioned this before, guys, in plenty of other videos, women don't want to have to settle if they don't have to. They want a guy that at the least is what they see as on their level. And education is a big one. Or better yet, a guy that's higher than them. Now, the masculine women, the feminists, they want a guy that's actually their level or lower so they can feel superior. But your average woman wants a guy that actually ideally can look up to who's higher than them because they feel like they get a prize then, right? But with more and more women seeking not just degrees but advanced degrees and less guys seeking the advanced degrees, then they have to be the one on top, so to speak, and they don't want that. They want somebody, at least if they got a master's degree, they want to do with a master's degree. If they got a PhD, they want a guy with a PhD, amongst the many other things. Not many of those walking around. He says it's hard to write about this without sounding like you believe young women must place finding a husband above forging a successful career. And he says, I don't. Or you believe more men should be admitted to university at the expense of women to plug the husband gap. I don't. Or that marrying someone with a lower level of education is a terrible thing. He says, I don't believe that either. But as the business journalist John Berger relates in his book, Dateonomics, if an educated woman wants to form a long-term partnership with a man of similar education, the numbers are stacked against her. Exactly. And like I told you guys, they want someone at least what they see in their view on their level, but preferably higher up. Unfortunately, what happens is they then can't get that guy. They're alone, upset, and again, ultimately point the finger at guys saying, there are no good men out there. When there are plenty of good men out there. There are plenty of great guys out there that may not have master's degrees or PhDs, or maybe in some cases bachelors. They don't go to college. They got a good trade and make a damn good living and are very comfortable. It's all about that stupid degree. Kat, who works in social media and graduated last year, says of her group of female friends, only one of them has a boyfriend, and the others are, listen to this, are all really attractive, fun girls, clever, educated, and can't find a boyfriend. It's really odd. That's bullshit. If they are really attractive, like they actually are, this isn't her just saying this because they're her friends, and fun and all that stuff, and can't get a boyfriend, what does that say? It's because they're too picky, because they want those top guys and the other guys aren't good enough for them. She thinks a lot of it has to do with dating apps as Tinder, where everyone's thinking there's something better around the corner. Well, that's accurate. But it could be just the numbers game, she says, though Berger will say these two things are linked. Maybe because there is more choice of girls than there ever was. It's more difficult to find a guy because the pool is smaller. That's complete bullshit. If a girl's good looking, there's going to be no problem with her getting a guy. The issue is, it's not because it's so easy for guys to get women, okay? For a top percentage of guys, it's easy to get women, but by and large, the majority of guys, it's not very easy to get, let alone the women they want. So it has to do with the pickiness of the female population, which has gotten higher and higher. Berger started noticing that he was around for far more single women than men. It struck me as odd because the women seemed to have a lot more going on for them than some men he knew in relationships, which is my way of saying they were better looking and better company. He says over the phone from New York, this was also true of my circle of friends outside of work. I knew a lot of single women and my wife, and I used to try to play matchmaker, but it got to the point where we didn't know any single men out there. I wanted to figure out why. His book, which he says I normally write about much more boring stuff like the stock market and energy. The stock market and the financial market isn't boring to me. Well, to some people it is, but I love that stuff. I love finance and economics, but that's me. Is set out to find what is going on. Well, he said here that he and his wife are having a hard time finding single guys. Well, for their friends. Well, they're married, and married people tend to hang out with married people, and they tend to not be as around single people. And usually, wives tend to try to keep their husbands away from the single guys because they don't want their husband to get any bad ideas. At first, he thought it was just a big city problem. Perhaps more educated women than men were drawn to New York, where he lives, or cities like Los Angeles or London. But as it turned out, it wasn't a big city phenomenon at all. The numbers are pretty much the same across the United States. Across young people aged 30 and under, there are about 4 college grad women for every 3 college grad men. In many cases, this gender gap is even bigger in rural states than in urban ones. It's not just in the US, it's most Western countries, whether it's Italy, the UK, Australia. See? This is going on everywhere, guys. More women are going to school. And hey, anybody that's trying to better themselves, cool, I respect it. This is a men's channel. We obviously know that I help men out here, but I'll be honest here. Anyway, anybody is trying to better themselves in one form or another, I respect. But don't complain when you now feel you're on a certain level and everybody else is beneath you and you can't get a right guy. I don't want to hear about that bullshit. In the United States, he writes, that among 22 to 29-year-olds, there are 5.5 million college-educated women and 4.1 million college-educated men. That's a big gap, percentage-wise, in terms of the difference. We are seeing a gap in the UK, too. Last year, a record number of women outnumbered men, with nearly 58,000 more women than men. In the vernacular of the best-selling dating manuals, it's not that he's just not into you, writes Berger, it's that there aren't enough of him. In the United States, his book has been greeted with relief. Women have told me it's a comfort to know there's nothing wrong with them, just that they've fallen victim to the numbers. So they're thinking, okay, there's more women than men, so therefore it's not our fault. It's not our fault that we're too picky. It's not our fault that we're, essentially think that we're better than what we deserve. Or we deserve more. No, because they're doing that to be convenient. The reality is they're just too picky. And by the way, I've known some women that they're with guys now, to no surprise, that they wouldn't have given the time of day to 5-10 years earlier. In no way, shape, or form. And these are women that are have master's degrees and do very well for themselves. Because I know a lot of people, I know friends of friends and those type of things. And ultimately they end up with some guys that, these guys are by no means dummies. These guys are by no means don't have credentials, but they're not with master's degrees and stuff like that, okay? And eventually they real, but 10 years ago when they were in their prime, or absolute prime, they were seeking the top guys. It goes on. To be clear, we are talking about the heterosexual women who want to find a partner. There are plenty of straight women who don't feel finding a man is a high priority. Well, that's because they're younger and they're riding the carousel and they're working on career in their 20s. Wait till 30 comes knocking. Wait till they're almost 30 years old. That's when the things will change. But for educated women who refuse to date non-educated men, it creates 2 problems, says Berger. It creates a statistical challenge because they are voluntarily limiting themselves to a dating pool that has 4 women for every 3 men. But it also gives way too much leverage to those college-educated men, and I think it encourages those men to be overly choosy and to delay settling down. This kind of classicism doesn't penalize the men because the supply of educated women is so large. Well, as I've said before, when guys realize that they are the gatekeepers to relationships, when guys get to be in their prime and realize that they are what you can call it high value, high status, whatever you want to classify it as, all of a sudden the guys realize, hey, I got options. I can take my time. I can date multiple women if I want to. And if they don't like it, too bad. There's plenty to replace her. Essentially, guys, when we get to our prime and actually have good things going for us and realize that, we become, in a way, like women were when we were in college. Because a young girl in college who's just average looking, just kind of cute, could replace a guy like that. She could have guys, she could literally hold a sign that says free you know what, and there'd be guys lined up down the street, right? But that's not the case 15 years later. I mean, she's still good looking. They can still get guys, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be the same. But guys then, but right here they're making out to be that guys are taking their time and being choosy. Well, guys earned it. And generally guys don't care so much about getting married as much as women do. He thinks one of the drivers of the so-called hookup culture is the number of men who have found a wealth of available women to choose from. I'm not trying to be a morality police, he says, and he's not saying that everyone wants to be or should be seeking marriage, or there aren't enough women who enjoy casual, you-know-what as much as men. But I do think the imbalance gives men more incentive to play the field. Well, he's making it out to be that all guys are like this, and it's so easy. Believe me, I would say probably about 80% of guys, it's difficult to get women. Okay, but the top 10 to 20%, it's a lot easier. He continues, man, you can hear that rain. It isn't really that surprising that we like to form long-term relationships with someone like ourselves and a sort of mating. The term sociologists use to describe this tendency has been rising. I suppose it's horrible to say, but I guess if someone is more intelligent or better qualified, I feel that I have to be wooed by them, says Holly, 27 years old, who is an MA and works in post-production for television. She is mainly attracted to Oxbridge graduates, she says with a small laugh. She says, she's quoted as saying, I do prefer dating people who are intellectually superior. For her, she says, it's a curiosity thing. The idea that her partner will be able to teach her things. See? Right there. She wants a guy that's higher than her. She admitted it right there. Because again, nobody wants to settle. No guy wants to settle for an average-looking woman. And no woman wants to settle for an average guy in terms of pay and status and all. If they can do it, they want the highest guy because it makes them look good. It's all about that, guys. But when they realize they can't get that guy or the clock is ticking, then they'll settle for the guy that's on their level or worse, God forbid, maybe lower than them if they have higher degrees than the guy doesn't. The guy says both men and women prefer someone who is in similar education, says Professor Michelle Bilot, Professor of Economics and Director of the Behavioral Laboratory at the University of Edinburgh. When you look at marriage data and you see that people are married to similar people, you don't know if it's because they are more likely to meet similar people or they actually want similar people. What she and a colleague did instead was look at the pool of speed daters who have been put together. You can actually see who they pick between people who have different types of education. That indicated there is a preference for similarity. I think it's almost a biological thing. There's a very strong preference for similarities along a range of attributes such as age, height, occupation, and interest. Well, at the end of the day, again, women are going to go, don't get me wrong, women like looks, a good-looking guy and dresses well, takes care of himself physically, but also the status and education, that's a big deal. It's far more a bigger deal for most women than it is for most guys, absolutely, because guys, you know, if she's very pretty and she has a great body, believe me, and if she's cool and loyal and fun to be around and minimal drama and minimal nagging and all that, she could have a high school degree and that's it. And the guy will take her versus a girl with a master's degree and challenged in the looks department and has a high career and great salary. We don't care about that stuff. We want a girl who takes care of herself, looks good, is feminine, is girly, is a little bit old-fashioned, is not one of these ball-busting, masculine-ass chicks that you have today, which is in varying degrees, but unfortunately more and more common. The increasing prevalence and efficiency of online dating has also had an effect, says Berger, because of the filtering tick-box nature of it. Whereas Evan Marquette, a dating coach whose advice I like to read, warns, you don't marry a list of traits, you marry a human being. Well, the young women want a list of traits when they're younger and have obviously the upper hand, but when they get older and the clock is ticking, then all of a sudden they realize that giant laundry list of all these things, and many of them, they have to start shortening those lists. Online dating is a little like buying a car, says Berger. We're used to checking off options we want on a new car, and so is it with online dating. There is so much box checking, height, weight, race, dog person, cat person. I think what happens is people end up seeking a partner who is just like them, and the one box that educated people don't even think twice about checking is college education. Well, how much college education are we talking about here? They never even see the dating profiles of people who don't have a degree. Whereas when we meet potential partners in person, at work, in a cafe, on the train, their educational achievements aren't the first thing that are obvious, and where we find out later. They may cease to hold as much weight. If you and I met, I dropped out of college, and we hit it off, maybe it wouldn't matter, says Berger. But now those two people would never see each other's dating profile because of the way online dating works. Yeah, you can set certain parameters, and you want somebody that has a master's degree. You're not going to see anybody else below that unless you actually configure the dating apps to see other options. Robin Dunbar, a professor of evolutionary psychology at Oxford University, says women looking for equally educated male partners will be forced to compete, I guess, and those that lose will have to downgrade their expectations and are likely to marry later as a result. There is historical evidence for this. He points to analysis of parish marriages registered from an era of Germany in the 18th and 19th centuries. We see this in the historical data. Actually, ages at marriages are later for those who marry down the social scale than those who marry up at the same level. This isn't just an issue for educated women, though the focus has been on them. Women's romantic choices are always analyzed, of course, with a skew towards the scaremongering. I doubt anybody was too worried about men's prospects when male graduates outnumbered females. If there are more graduate women than men, who are those men with lower levels of education dating if the educated women won't consider them? Well, the women that are realizing that their time is running out, they're the ones dating them, or the guys are dating younger women who aren't quite as picky yet. Okay, they're still picky, but these guys are older than them, so they'll go for them. And then maybe they're still in college, and it's not as big a deal. But these type of women these guys are dating eventually are going to become just as picky as well. It says here, if there are more graduate women, I read that part. In hindsight, I almost wish I had made this a bigger part of the book, says Berger. This same trend makes dating hard for working class men as well. In the United States, among people aged 22 to 29 who do not have a college degree, there are 9.4 million single men versus 7.1 million single women. So the dating world is just as hard for those blue-collar guys. But the reality is that we don't talk about their dating challenges the same way we talk about challenges faced by educated women. Translation, the guys aren't going to bitch about it and complain about it versus how women will. One of my bits of advice in the book is that I think we all need to open our hearts and minds to dating across socioeconomic lines. Berger predicts that we will see more pairings of college-educated women and working-class guys. And that's true. I've seen this. I know I have friends that are in this situation as well. But again, like I said, these women, they trust me, 10 years ago when they were in their absolute prime, they would be going for these guys. This is now, let's be honest here, if we're being honest, is because the clock's ticking. And some of those are very good relationships, at least now. I refer to those as mixed collar marriages. As you can see, more in the African American community, where the gender disparity in college education is more extreme. You certainly see more educated women married to working class guys. He doesn't like the idea of that choosing a mate with a lower level education is somehow considered settling. And of course, having a lower level education is strongly correlated with a lower income, but not always. One guy says, I hate that kind of association. My wife and I had a friend from college, an Ivy League educated school teacher, and she married a blue-collar guy. They've been happily married for 20 years and have raised a fantastic son together, and it really bothers me that someone might tell their son someday that his mom settled or compromised in order to marry his dad. I just think it's offensive. Well, you may think it's offensive, but that's probably what happened. She's not going to admit to her husband that she settled for him. I mean, no woman would, at least if she's sober, but that's probably what happened. There's also evidence to suggest that couples in which the woman is more educated than the man are happier. One study of more than 1,500 interviews with couples found that in relationships where the woman was more educated than the man, they were more likely to stay together than in couples where both had a low level of education, or where it was the woman with the lower level. In the past, couples where the woman was better educated were more likely to divorce than other couples, but no more. Among marriages in the U.S. formed from the 1990s on, that was no longer the case, says Professor Christine Schwartz. Is this mostly down to changing attitudes? I think probably a large part of it is changing attitudes, and we do know that young men and women today, their ideal type of marriage is an egalitarian marriage. We also know that from surveys of people's preferences, men now say it will bother them less to be in a relationship with women who out-earn them. Some men don't care, other men have issues with it, but it's been shown, definitely all the stories and articles I do, that often when the woman out-earns the guy doesn't feel as strong, he doesn't feel as like a man, he feels a little emasculated, not all, but there are some, and she oftentimes she's making more, so she might be the breadwinner or just making more, and she's in the more masculine role and he's more in the feminine. But this is more of an extreme case where she's making a lot more and he's dependent on her, or if he's a stay-at-home dad and he's Mr. Mom and she's the plays the role as the traditional breadwinner, and the dynamics definitely screwed up. So we can go on and on about how that could end up, but anyhow, We can see from data from around the world that men are marrying women with more education than themselves. There seems to be a very tight relationship between changes in the gender gap in education and what happens to marriage and cohabitation patterns. To me, looking at the demographic data, it doesn't seem that there is a widespread aversion to forming serious relationships across educational lines. There are more and more relationships in which women have more education than their male partners. Yes, again, because the numbers are there. More women are seeking not just college degrees, but more advanced degrees. So, if they want to get a guy, they're going to have no choice but to settle. Now, the question is, how happy are they going to be to settle? Well, looking at the state of marriage in today's world, that answers that question, but there's many other elements that go into the high divorce rate, of course. She doesn't see large numbers of educated women holding out for an educated partner and remaining unhappily single, in other words. She cites a study by Marianne Bertrand of women who had higher incomes on average than men. She argues that this can account for some of the decline of marriage rates, but I think there is very little actual evidence. This is only paper and that I know of that points that we do have a lot of evidence that shows partners of relationships have changed over time. However, Below thinks women may be increasingly accepting of the fact that they may not meet that sort of partner they want and therefore choose to be alone. Yeah, basically, there are some that are so picky they're not going to meet the guy on the same educational level who they think they are entitled to and deserve, that they're alone. But in time, believe me, they'll stop feeling so fabulous and like the Sex and the City characters and want a guy. They may be able to get guys, but actually a permanent guy that can put a ring on her finger and walk her down. She can walk down the aisle with and say, "I do." Eventually, they all want to say, "I do." At some point, even once, just to say they can do it, that some guy would marry them. One of the developments we see is that single women decide to have a child by themselves. For example, something that would have been unthinkable 50 years ago. But she adds, "I have yet to meet a woman who says they wouldn't consider a guy who was less educated. I think the question is more, do you have the opportunity to meet?" By the way, I know a few women that are single in their 40s, good-looking women, but definitely picky. And it's gotten to the point that they are now seeking the artificial insemination option, thanks to medical science, having a kid of their own, because now they want to have families and kids, but they just somehow can't seem to find the right guy. Even those are good-looking women, and they can definitely have no problem getting guys to hook up with them, they, for some reason, just can't ever seem to find the right guy. Why? Because they're so picky. And now they're having kids on their own. That number is rising. A study by the Pew Research Center think tank last year found that for the first time in the United States, there were more couples in which the woman was more educated than her husband than the opposite. They found from the 2012 census data a 21% of women were married to men with a lower level of education than them, a threefold increase since 1960. And this was even more marked among newlyweds. 27% of couples had women who were better educated against the just 15% in which the man was better educated. But there is still a stigma, says I can't pronounce this lady's name. This woman who runs a matchmaking service, particularly for women over 40. She says a potential partner's education level is usually the first thing any woman specifies. The first thing? If she runs a dating agency, a matchmaking service for women over 40, she's going to clean up in terms of like the ones that, okay, I got to find a guy. I'm 40 years old. I got to find a guy, She says, I think people that if someone is not educated to the same standards they are, they won't have anything in common, which is absolute nonsense. People think I've dedicated my life to my career and I'm not going to settle for anything less than I am. Funny enough, men hardly ever discuss it. Among younger women, I got to shout because it's freaking rain. Among younger women, recent English graduate Kat isn't convinced that today's single female graduates are that worried about their prospects. I suppose it depends what sort of person you're going for. If you're going for a lawyer type, maybe it's more challenging. But I find myself going for musicians and creative people who are intelligent but not scarily academic, and who don't necessarily have a degree. I think it's more about drive and ambition than education. That's the most attractive quality someone can have. Well, I gotta say this, guys. There are plenty of guys out there that may not have college degrees, but they are very intelligent, smart people that are self-educated. I didn't graduate college. I dropped out of college to start my own business. And I now own, right now, 2 businesses, and I'm going to be starting a 3rd one very, very soon. And I make damn good money, and I got money. But there are women that wouldn't give me the time of day because I don't have that degree. And they'd be missing out, so screw them. But the point is, you can have people, I've known people that have very high levels of degrees but have no common sense, are complete boneheads. And I've also known people in my life, both men and women, that don't have, in some cases, a college degree at all, and they're some of the smartest people I've ever met. So, go figure. But at the end of the day, guys, I thought that was pretty interesting to go over. This is how things are going. And again, you're going to see more and more complaints that there are no good men out there because, it's easier to blame us than for women to actually open up and say, yeah, you know what, I'm too picky, I'm being ridiculous here, because society has conditioned them to be that picky. Okay, thanks the feminist movement and things like that. I can go on forever there. But, it is what it is. But I thought it'd be entertaining to go over this article to show you what's going on. And it isn't just speculating this. Research actually is showing this. But anyhow, guys, that's it for today. Thank you for bearing with me with all this rain here. I guarantee you, when I'm done this video, it's going to stop. But of course, in the small window of time today that I have to film a video to make sure I get this thing done for today, it has to be pouring raining. So thank you for bearing with me. So, all right, guys, that is it for today. Be sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think about this. And be sure to like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe. And I'll catch you next time.